Hello, everyone, and I hope you've had quite a great time. It's me again, Hamid, your favorite English teacher, and this is the second episode of me correcting your IELTS writing task 2 essays. So, without any further ado, let's get started. But before that, thank you for subscribing to my channel and telling everyone to follow this page because I'm creating some very top-notch, high-quality videos for YouTube. So thank you in advance for clicking that button down below. Let's get started. Today, the topic that we're going to discuss is something that all of us have somehow or somewhere in our lives had some experience with. So let's take a look. Most people have forgotten the meaning behind traditional or religious festivals during festival periods. People nowadays only want to enjoy themselves. So the topic is pretty clear. It's telling us that these days people only have certain festivals because they enjoy their time doing that. But the historical or cultural or religious importance of it is rather not important anymore. And the task is asking us, to what extent do you agree or disagree with this opinion? So that's pretty clear. Let's get started. Take a look at the introduction. And I'm not going to read it aloud, but take a very quick look over it. What is the first and most basic problem with this introduction? As I'm sure that you guys can guess, the very first sentence is quite long. So let's try to read it with each other. Considering the fact that the majority of traditional festivals have been inspired by historical events, revolutionary occurrences, or some religious stories having happened in the past, it can be assumed rational not to be bold after decades or centuries. Okay, so as you can see, the readability, our ability to read a text easily is very low over here. And what is the reason? Because of the very long sentence and having many different clauses in one sentence. I've always told my students not to write sentences longer than a line and a half. This is somewhere about, let's say, 13 to 17 words. The reason lies in the fact that when you write more words in one sentence, it's going to be pretty difficult for you guys to control the grammar and to think about the meaning that you want to convey to the reader. It becomes very difficult. And on the reader's side, it is really difficult to follow such sentences. Okay, so this sentence could be broken down into at least two sentences. So let's not forget to shorten our sentences when we have very long ones in a writing. Okay, because over here we're going to lose a lot of point on GRA, which is grammatical range and accuracy, as the sentence has some grammatical issues. Okay, so let's not forget that. Let's take a look at the second sentence of the introduction. However, people have tried to respect them through reminding. They haven't perception about what has gone clearly. Okay, so again, we have some grammatical issues over here, which is not quite good in an IELTS writing. What are those grammatical issues? So let's take a look. People have tried to respect them through reminding. Reminding is wrong. And they haven't perception. They haven't got or they don't have a perception about what has gone clearly. So let's not forget, it's pretty important for you guys to understand that GRA, or grammatical range and accuracy, asks you in a band 6 to actually use a mixture of complex and simple structures. This is something that we need to keep in mind. Whenever we make mistakes, and we have a lot of mistakes in one paragraph or in one writing, the main problem is that because of repeating these problems, we're showing our examiner that we do not know grammar quite well. And that is the fundamental problem of making mistakes. But if we take a look at the band descriptors, we're going to see that even the IELTS band descriptors allow for some mistakes to take place. But whenever the number of the mistakes increase, we're going to lose a lot of points. So let's keep that in mind. So the second sentence, which actually should be the thesis statement, is not very clear. It doesn't mention exactly what the writer has in his or her mind. And that is a big problem. So let's not forget that a thesis statement should actually include two different things. The first thing is the concepts that you want to describe or talk about in the body paragraphs. And the second thing is your point of view. Now, if you pay attention to the third sentence of the introduction, the writer is actually doing this in the third one, and there's no problem. But there is a question over here. Can't we add this to the previous sentence so that we have a lower number of words used in an introduction? Well, the basic answer is yes, we definitely can. So don't forget this. It's really important to keep this in mind. Now, let's move on. So the introduction isn't very high quality. And the main reason is because the writer is trying too hard to use difficult vocabulary and difficult structures, but in a wrong way. So we don't have a lot of accuracy over here. There are a lot of mistakes involved in the writing, and that is not a very good sign. So let's move on and let's go to the first body paragraph. Throughout history, traditional celebrations mainly have been recorded owing to pleasant occasions or in order to appreciate something valuable. Okay, before I continue, guys, let's not forget that using punctuations like this is completely wrong. A punctuation mark should be stuck to the word before, and you have to leave a space after the punctuation mark. So basically, if I write, for example, I, like this, I should write the comma over here and then leave a small space over here, and then I write whatever I want after that space. And don't forget, you will be scored based on your punctuations in GRA as well. So it's pretty important to not make mistakes with punctuations. So let's continue. Once again, if you take a look at the first sentence, we have some introduction into the main topic of this paragraph. So the writer is telling us that this has happened mainly because of the pleasant occasions or in order to appreciate something valuable. Okay, so these are the two things that the writer is telling us he or she wants to talk about. Let's continue. They have been often experienced individually under existing circumstances in the past. Consequently, people were likely to understand the happiness beneath good changes. Tribal alliance, for instance, has led to ending wars between them, which obviously couldn't have been undermined whenever they gather to celebrate that. While next generations, including the present one, are undergoing another happenings, and they might attend in festivals merely in order to take some distance from current problems for a while. Okay. So the major problem over here now, in comparison to the other writing that we worked on the other day, there is better coherence involved over here. So you see that there is a little bit of development happening over here. But the main question is this: by the end of this body paragraph, am I, as the writer, am I introducing and taking you through all of the steps that are needed to get to the main point that I am introducing in the first sentence? Is that basically happening? So once again, take a look at the first sentence. What does it say? Um, so we want to talk about the pleasant occasions at the time to appreciate something valuable. Now, once again, take a look at the second sentence over here. It says they have been often experienced individually under existing circumstances in the past. Okay, what do we exactly mean by this sentence? What does it refer to? What do we basically mean? What does this they refer to? What is it talking about? Is they referring to the valuable things? Is it referring to the pleasant occasions, or is it basically talking about the celebrations? The writer isn't making that clear for us, and that is a big problem. They have been often experienced individually under existing circumstances in the past, but the bigger question over here is why? Why do I need to have this sentence? Now let's move on to the third one. Consequently, people were likely to understand the happiness beneath good changes. Again, this sentence is not making clear what it means by happiness beneath good changes. Okay, now the example that we have after it is a very good example. It actually presents us with the evidence that we need to understand what is being introduced in the previous sentence. But again, it's not a really good sentence of introduction. We don't have a good introduction over here of what exactly it is that we're talking about. And that is a lot of the times the problem with a lot of the IELTS test takers. So let's not forget that these kinds of sentences, they are not quite clear and they do not convey the message that you want to send. And that is a big problem. So the next sentence is okay, I would say. Tribal alliance, for instance, has led to ending wars between them. Okay, again, we have a use of a word that does not necessarily refer to something clear over here, which obviously couldn't have been undermined. Okay, again, I don't understand why we need to have a clause added over here. This clause is just adding up to the difficulty of the reader reading this. It's making everything quite difficult for the reader. So we don't need to add it over here. Whenever they gathered, again, we don't have a good referent for they. Who does it refer to? Gathered to celebrate that. Okay, now over here, the that actually goes back to the celebrations, but as you can see, there are a lot of pronouns being used in this writing. And basically, because we have a lot of pronouns and not a lot of development taking place, there is a lot of difficulty on the reader's side to understand what exactly the writer means. let's just keep in mind that we need to keep everything readable as well. And only using difficult structures will not help us in a writing. So let's move on to the next sentence. While next generations, including the present one, are undergoing another happening, if you want to say, or other happenings, and they might attend in festivals merely in order to take some distance from current problems for a while. This sentence, the last one, doesn't make any sense. As the reader, I really don't understand what you want to say, because the sentence is rather long, and at the same time, it's not making clear what exactly you want to talk about. So I always ask my students to have the SVO technique. Okay, so what does that mean? A sentence has a subject, a verb, and an object, and that's it. So if you want to make a sentence more complex, you can add one relative clause to it, for example. But don't forget, when you add too many components to a sentence, it makes it very unclear and very difficult for the reader to understand what you exactly mean by it. The same thing is happening in the majority of the places in this writing. So just keep that in mind. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Moreover, okay. So when you use moreover, that basically means that what you have presented in this paragraph is going to be necessarily about what you have introduced already in the previous one. So just keep in mind and ask yourself this question: does the next paragraph, the one that you started with moreover, does it necessarily follow what you have already introduced in the previous paragraph or not? Okay, so let's take a look. Religious festivals somehow go back to the previous insights into the issues, such as the meaning of God, blessing, life, and death. Okay. So there is a major problem over here, and I'm going to address it right now. Let's go back for a moment to the task. In the task, we have to what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement, the statement that we have above? And the writer over here has actually talked about the fact that he or she entirely agrees with this opinion. Okay. So basically, the writer is telling us that everyone has forgotten everything about the meaning of festivals and the festival period and everything. Okay? So now let's go back to the second body paragraph. Religious festivals somehow go back to the previous insight into the issues such as the meaning of God, blessing, life, and death. Okay, so the writer over here has chosen not to talk about the other side, the side that he or she disagrees with. What is the problem with that? There is basically no problem, but you're making everything more difficult for yourself. Why? Because talking about two sides is always easier than talking about one side and one side only. Why? Because whatever you introduce in the first body paragraph can be made negative or upside down, or the opposite basically, can be introduced in the second body paragraph. Okay, so basically you can make your life much easier if you talk about both sides of the argument. Okay, and the other problem is this: when you say that you entirely agree with something. Let's not forget that that is a very bold statement. Is your argument now supporting that completely? Let's take a look. They have been redefining over the past decades, maybe, given that science, researchers, and philosophy. Okay, so this sentence is incomplete. We don't have all of the different components needed for a complete sentence. And why does this happen? Because the writer basically is trying to use too many difficult vocabulary and very difficult grammatical structures. Because of those, the sentence has become a little bit difficult to handle. And if you actually think about the SVO rule, the subject, the verb, and the object, you're going to realize that this sentence is incomplete. So whenever you're writing something, always take into consideration the availability of all of these three components, because it's really important. If you don't do this, you have an incomplete sentence, and your score will be deducted on grammatical range and accuracy. So it's really unclear what exactly you mean in this sentence, because the sentence is actually incomplete. And then you say thus. Okay, so this is a clear connection between one sentence and the previous sentence. What is the problem over here? The problem is, because the previous sentence is incomplete, as a reader, I don't understand what the relationship between the previous one and the next one actually is. So, now let's go on. Thus, our horizons into these kinds, don't forget these kinds of things, can be different in comparison with our ancestors. The reason for which we don't value the stories behind ceremonials. Okay. Again, this is just, there is no justification of why you've gotten to this final result. Why do you think like this? You have to explain the why over here. Always keep this in mind. We need to explain two questions, why and how. If you don't have at least one of these questions answered in a body paragraph, that body paragraph is problematic, and you actually need to change that body paragraph. Okay, so just keep this in mind. And apart from that, this body paragraph is incomplete. We don't have any other development. We don't have any examples. We don't have like the ones we had in the first body paragraph. And when you compare the second body paragraph with the first one, you realize that this writing does not have overall progression, which means that the writing should take a step-by-step approach in presenting the argument and developing what it wants to say, its main points. So we actually don't have that. And that is a major problem. So let's move on to the conclusion. In brief, human life has always been encountering a wide sort of incidents, you don't need based on which our closures have been adjusted, and I hold that the view that humans shouldn't be blamed as obvious creatures. This conclusion is quite problematic because, again, the writer is trying to use so many difficult structures that the meaning of the sentence is not being conveyed correctly. Also, the usage of and over here makes it very unclear what the relationship between, and it doesn't justify the reason why you're using and. Is the previous sentence exactly the same with the next sentence? Well, it's basically not. And as I explained in the previous video, from yesterday, and is not a very good word to use in such occasions. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, now that we've taken a quick look at the whole writing, I will talk a little bit about the four scoring criteria. So the first one is task response. The second one is CC, or cohesion and coherence. Then we have LR, or lexical resource. And finally, we have GRA, or grammatical range and accuracy. Okay, these are the four criteria that we need to pay attention to. Now, what we want to, about this particular writing, if we take a look at the band descriptors, now in the next episodes, I will have a chart added over here so we can talk about it. The problem with task response in this writing was that we didn't have a clear development in all of the different sections of the writing. Basically, in the second body paragraph, we didn't have enough support or evidence for what the writer was saying. And that was the major problem with task response. Also, in our introduction, we didn't have a clear-cut thesis statement that actually describes what the writer intends to do. That's why in this writing, we will get around a 5 or a 6 on our task response. It's not going to be above that. About coherence and cohesion, in this writing, because of the lack of overall progression, again, we're not going to go above a 5 or a 6. And guys, I'm just going to give you a tentative score. So this score is not an exact score because I don't want to be a very exact person about scoring, because I'm not an IELTS examiner. I'm just an experienced IELTS trainer. Then, with regards to lexical resource, because of the lack of accuracy in using related or topic-related vocabulary throughout the response, again, we're going to be stuck at a 6. We're not going to achieve a band 7. With regards to GRA, we're going to be stuck somewhere around 5 because of the many problems that we had with grammar. There was an attempt throughout the response to use more complex structures, but the many mistakes that we have throughout the response will make us stick at band 5. So the score of this writing would be somewhere between a 5.5 and a 6. It's not going to go above 6, but in order to make it better, you guys have to keep in mind to think about all of the things that I discussed in this video. So thank you again for your support. I hope you liked tonight's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and support my page on Instagram and my channel on YouTube. Take care, have fun, and bye-bye.